Welcome back to the Donkey Vote podcast with Francis.
Tobias.
And George. These interviews will be focusing on the past careers of politicians before they entered parliament.
With a strong intention to our audience that anything is achievable no matter what you studied in university or college.
If you like this sort of content, please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Also, we are on YouTube and Spotify, so make sure you follow us on those platforms.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram as well to keep updated with the latest episodes and reels that we release.
Enjoy the
interview.
Today we are joined by the member for Moncrief, Angie Bell. Angie, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Francis. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
No problem at all. It's an honor to have you on here. Just for our audience out there who may not know an entire lot about you, could you give us a little brief description of yourself just before we get into the questions?
Well, federal member for Moncrief, as you said, for those that don't know where that is, it's the beautiful Gold Coast, and it's the central electorate on the Gold Coast. I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of Surfers Paradise, and that is...
we've been there a couple of times.
Yeah, Schoolies, that's where Schoolies is, which is fantastic. Yeah. I always look forward to that. I'm a coalition member, so currently in opposition. I sit in the Liberal Party room, and I'm also the Shadow Minister for Youth and the Shadow Minister for Early Childhood Education. And I've been in the Parliament for 5 years. I was first elected in 2019 and re-elected at the last federal election in 2022.
And that's quite interesting as well that you're the Shadow Minister for Youth, and you're coming on the podcast talking to us. So it's always a good get to have the Shadow Minister for Youth, or even the Minister for Youth, talking to. Not saying any names there, but probably doesn't want to come on here. But it's great to have the Shadow Minister for Youth on the podcast and talking to us a little bit about their story in terms of how they got into politics.
Well, young people are the future of our great country, and so I'm at your service.
Yes, yeah. We might as well get straight into the question. Sorry. Sure. Angie, my first question to you is: how was your high school and university life, and do you have any specific memorable moments you'd like to share? If they're illegal or anything, feel free not to share them.
Good ones.
I don't want you to get into legal trouble.
Well, I went to a big public school in South Australia called Gawler High School, and there was about 2,000 young people at that high school.
It happens to be the same high school. That's the same school someone in Birmingham went to.
I was just about to say it happens to be the same school that Birmo went to. He's a little bit younger than me.
Oh, okay.
But we both went to Gawler High School, and another famous Australian that went to Gawler High School is Darren Lehman. Book, as he was known at high school, was always out on the oval playing with a cricket bat and ball and not inside very much. But, of course, he's had a big career in cricket, but we won't go there. So we're talking about my high school experience, which I had to really fight to finish high school. I was the first in my family to finish high school and certainly the first to go to university. It wasn't the sort of done thing. It was more about going out and working as soon as you can to support the family. And so I sort of dug my heels in and said, I want to finish high school. I started playing the saxophone, which I'm sure you read in my bio, when I was about 13 years old, and it was something that lit me up inside. I really wanted to play that instrument, primarily because I wanted to play Henry Mancini's theme, The Pink Panther, which was played on the tenor saxophone. And I became quite good at it. So I worked very hard at practicing that instrument, and I loved it deeply. And I think that's probably an experience and a lesson for very many young people, that when you find something that you really love and that lights you up, if you spend a lot of time doing it, you can become very good at it. And when you become good at something, which is usually about 10,000 hours down the track,
a lot of practice.
Then doors can open for you. And so when I was in year 12, my deputy principal singled me out and said, you should apply to be a Rotary Exchange student. And I'd never thought about doing anything like that. And we had an exchange student from Norway at our school at the time, and I met him and we chatted about the opportunity. And my deputy principal at the high school was also the president of the local Rotary Club, and he put me forward as a Rotary scholar. And lo and behold, against all the odds and against all the other applicants from many private schools as well, I won the scholarship. And for me, that absolutely changed my life in terms of opportunity and experience and self-development, which is so important in growth. And so when I speak to high school students, I've got 35 schools in my electorate, but when I speak to the high school students, particularly from public schools, I say take those opportunities and say yes to any opportunity, even if you're feeling like you're out of your comfort zone, if you're a bit frightened about your own ability, say yes to that good opportunity, and that's what will propel you forward in your life. So that was the moment for me that really changed everything.
That year 12 specific moment where you got into the Rotary Scholar Scheme. And
absolutely.
Where were you actually sent to? What country were you sent to? Because we previously interviewed one of the state Liberal members here, Richard Reardon, who was also in the Rotary Scholar Scheme, and he went to I think Calgary in Canada for 1 year, which was quite a good experience he was talking about. So where did you actually go, Angie?
I went to Denmark.
Oh.
And for 12 months, I went to Denmark. So I learned the language. I went to school. I did the second part of their year 12 and the first 6 months of their year 13, because they have 13 years of education, higher education in Denmark. And so it, for me, showed me a lot of experiences about travels, about history, about interpersonal relationships. Imagine you're 17 and you haven't experienced any of these things, and suddenly you have to rise to the occasion of representing your country. It's a big responsibility. And so I would reassure young people that you should push yourself outside your comfort zone, because that's when you do the growing and that's when you learn. So don't be frightened to fall down, and get back up, dust yourself off and keep going. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, always put yourself out there and, push yourself to do things that you think that you can't do, because, you might surprise yourself and you might achieve what you didn't think you could achieve. And, you could gain a greater understanding or experience something new, as you did in going to Denmark, Angie. So
that's right. And life is a zigzag. It's
exactly.
Francis, life takes you in all different directions. It's not a straight line from A to B. So you've got to enjoy the journey, and you've got to do the best with what you've got at that time and keep developing.
Yeah. So how would you rate your overall experience in Denmark? Did you get accustomed to their culture? I know, as you said before, you learned a little bit of Danish. Do you still remember some Danish even now?
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting as well, because their new queen there actually is from Australia, Princess Mary. So that's quite a interesting sort of, relationship there between Australia and Denmark.
Yes, and I was talking at the Surfers Paradise Rotary Club about this on Monday night. Rotary loves to have me as a guest speaker to talk about my experience. And I was talking about language and how that really does impact your interpersonal relationships and being able to learn that skill of another language. And Princess Mary, who is now Queen Mary of Denmark, her language skills at one point, when she first became the princess, weren't quite as good as my language skills, but now she has certainly overtaken my skill level. But it is useful to have another language, and I do use Danish regularly in Canberra with the Danish ambassador. I've also spoken Danish to a Swedish delegation who has visited Parliament House, talking about social services and the differences between Sweden and Australia, and how we support with a safety net. So speaking, the Swedes spoke Swedish to me and I spoke Danish back to them, and we sort of can understand one another through Scandinavian language. So that's been very useful. But I think it's also helped me with many other languages. So I can speak a little bit of many different languages because I've learned one language, or two if you include music as a language, which I certainly do.
Yeah, and Danish has a lot of similarities compared with, as you said, other European languages, Swedish, Finnish,
not so much Finnish.
Norwegian.
That's a tough one, but certainly,
Finnish is like a whole
Germanic.
different thing. Yeah, Finnish is a whole from what I've heard. Finnish and like Estonia are just like their own little like conglomerate of unbelievably hard languages to learn. And even for me and myself, Yeah, even for me, for myself, I'm half Filipino, so my Filipino Tagalog skills aren't the best, but I think it's important as well just to know another language, especially. And, whenever I go to the Philippines, I can speak to my relatives there in Tagalog. It's always a really good
Yeah.
feeling, and, it doesn't feel as foreign, I guess, when you're visiting a country when you already know their language.
Well, I think it's very important that you learn, certainly as a representative, about many other cultures and being able to get on a level with people and communicate with people. And that's something that I've learned through travel. And I have a beautiful Filipino community here on the Gold Coast. I spoke with them. I've been with them quite a few times, and just spoke with them recently after I met the president in the parliament, who visited and did a speech in our parliament recently. So just to have a little bit of insight into each different culture is very useful as an interpersonal skill. And I'd ask you, do you just do plain chicken adobo, or do you put veal in your adobo? Filipinos know what that is.
I dabble in both. You got to always try. Beef adobo is good, I have to admit.
Beef adobo.
Yeah, there's actually beef exists now. We have pork, chicken, beef. So actually for lunch today, I did have pork adobo.
I like chicken wings.
Fair enough. Actually, as well, one of my relatives actually lives on the Gold Coast and is part of the Filipino club there. So you might have met her one time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think she lives in Southport now, just around that Southport region.
It's not Shirley, is it?
No, not Shirley. No, her name is Lydia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
well, I
she's
was with them recently.
Oh, okay. You might have met her there. I'll send her the link to when we finish editing the podcast so she can see if she remembers you. I'll probably send it to her and see if she remembers Angie Bell.
Okay. Well, I'll say a shout out to the Filipino community on the Gold Coast.
Yeah. I think we'll move on to our second question now for you, Angie. So prior to Parliament, you had a very mixed career before politics. So you worked in the music industry for 40 years and you became an author of a book called Retail Rebranded. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
That's right.
How was your music career then? And did you make any famous hits? And what inspired you to write a book specifically about retail?
Well, I'll start with the last question first. Retail has inspired me to write a book about retail because I was working in retail for many, many years since, as you outlined, it's quite a big number, that 40 years. But since I was, sort of 12 or 13, I worked part-time in retail, and it was always music focused. So I worked selling pianos in a music shop. I taught as well, taught young people to play the saxophone and to sing as well for many years. But I worked as a salesperson, as a merchandiser, as a sales representative, as a state manager for many instrument importers. And so in that job, you travel around and you meet a lot of different people and you sell instruments to retailers. Again, many interpersonal skills that are needed for that role. And so during my travels, I then met a lot of different people and had a lot of different experiences. And I think that working in different industries is helpful for when you enter politics, if that's what you wish to do. Not that at the time I thought that I would ever be a politician. That was the last thing on my mind.
Career change there.
We'll get to that when you ask me that question. But I always had two jobs. I was always working hard. I had a night job as a musician, and on the weekends sometimes teaching. And during the day I would work in sales and marketing. And I found that there are a lot of retailers when I was a retail consultant who needed help, but they didn't have necessarily the spare funds to engage a consultant like me. So I wrote a small book, and actually I have it here for you.
You have it prepared. Is that Hermit the Frog?
Kermit the Frog. Well, he's a little sustainable and innovative frog. And so that's kind of the theme of the book is sustainability and innovation in terms of the retail business model. And so I was doing a master's at Griffith University here on the Gold Coast. And I decided instead of doing a dissertation, I would write a book that would help retailers. So it's got about 120 references in it. And whilst I was reading the book, this might lead into your next question, if I may, which I'm sure will be your next question, because I talked about how I got into politics. On the back of the book is a certain former treasurer of Australia. Can you see?
Who could that be?
Looks like Joe Hockey to me.
It is
Joseph
Joe Hockey.
Benedictine Hockey. So I met Joe Hockey at an event, and my band was playing at that event. So it was kind of my two worlds colliding that helped me get into politics. I was performing at that event, and then I met Joe, and he and I became good friends, and he also plays the saxophone. He's also one of 4 children, as I am, and he also is and was very passionate about small business. And so we hit off a friendship, and over time I had a few opportunities to meet with him, to talk with him on the phone, to be mentored by him, if you like. And then I was invited to Canberra by a local member here on the Gold Coast to go to his budget delivery speech. A budget night, it's a big deal in Canberra.
Is that the 2014 one?
The most unpopular one. That was the one.
Yes. I remember that from Nemesis.
Yes. It was quite unpopular. It was the cuts budget, if you like.
Yeah.
And during that evening in Canberra, I was privileged to be in a room where the Prime Minister came and gave a keynote speech, where Joe Hockey came in and gave a keynote speech, Julie Bishop, Bruce Bilson, and some other ministers at that time under the Abbott government. And I had the same feeling as when I wanted to play the saxophone, that same fire in the belly, that excitement, that aspiration, that inspiration. And I thought, I want to do that. I want to be part of this. This is amazing. Their vision for the country, their enthusiasm for the country and what they wanted to achieve as a government really inspired me. And so you might say, well, inspiration alone won't make you a politician, right?
I wouldn't necessarily say inspiration. Some people have said on the podcast, issues within their community, that sort of thing, is a main driving factor.
I think I wanted to share my pathway, and to show that someone like me from a disadvantaged background can represent their community. I was always just really looking to see if I was interested or whether politics would be right for me. I served the party. After that budget delivery speech, I came back to Queensland. I joined the Liberal National Party because I believed in the values about reward for effort. The harder you work, the luckier you get. Funny that. Smaller
good
government,
saying in life.
More effective. Hey?
A good saying, a good life motto, a good saying in life.
Yeah. The family as the unit is so important, family structure, and smaller government, as small as it can be, small and efficient, effective government, I think resonated with me. Freedom of speech, freedom of association, and opportunities. So preserving opportunities for young people, like that opportunity that I got as a young person, that I will never be able to repay through accepting engagements to speak at Rotary. I can't say no to them because they delivered so much to me. So I sort of consider them all to be mums and dads all over the country, anybody who's in Rotary International, and I thank them wherever I go for what they did for me as a young person. And I want to do that for the next generation of young people. I want to deliver opportunities, and that's what drives me. I have an Impact Summit here on the Gold Coast Youth Impact Summit, it's called, and we're about to deliver our second one at SeaWorld Resort. SeaWorld Foundation is our big partner who pays for that opportunity for young people, and it's about opening doors and lighting people up so that they have the passion that I felt, A, when I was a Rotary Exchange student, and B, when I visited Parliament House that time. So I came back to Queensland. I joined the Liberal National Party. I started serving. There were some women in the party who really believed in me, and they know who they are, and they pushed me forward to be their vice president. I served as vice president for 1 year, and then I was pushed forward to be the president of the women's branch with about 1,500 members in the LNP, and I became the women's president, and I served for 2 years in that role. And so that role meant that I was on the board of the Liberal National Party, what we call state executive, and I served there at a very high level in the party for 2 years, and it was my great privilege to do so.
So
service first.
Service first, and then becoming a member of parliament.
And then the local member here decided to retire. I was working for the member for Currumbin at the time, Jan Stuckey, for a short period of time to get some experience in running an office, which I'd never done before, and political office. And I stepped down from that role in order to run for pre-selection here in Moncrief when the retiring member, Stephen Chiobo, stepped down. And there was a pre-selection.
Yeah. I think you've basically covered all our questions at this point now.
Oh, have I?
No, it's fine. Continue, Angie, continue.
Then there was a pre-selection called, and there were 9 candidates who put their hand up. 5 were women, and I was the best on the day, winning by 2 votes.
So if 2 other people change their vote, you might not be in this position today.
That's correct.
Yeah, so always going to take, the privilege that you got given to become a member of parliament seriously every single day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that statement.
And if you don't want to, I could probably have a guess about which women were the ones that, really pushed you forward. Am I going to say Karen Andrews, member neighbouring electorate, was one of the women that kind of pushed you forward to get more involved in the political sphere in Queensland, or?
Well, I hadn't actually met Karen Andrews at that point in time.
Oh, really?
So it was women in the party. It was a number of very experienced LNP members who wanted me to be their president, and they also served on my executive. So they all went into office with me as the women's executive, and served as treasurer and vice president, and a few other positions as well. And so it was the party machine really that put me in the position of being the women's president, because, as you know, that's an elected office. All of the executive positions in the Liberal National Party are elected, and apart from the honorary legal counsel, I believe every other position apart from council trustees is an elected position. And so it's a great privilege when people vote for you to represent them inside the party and outside the party.
Exactly. And just to go back a little bit more towards your musical career, so you did work in the music industry for 40 years. So were there any specific highlights that you'd like to talk about on the podcast from your musical career?
The best gig and maybe the worst gig.
Yeah.
I think
there's probably a lot more good gigs than bad gigs, I'm going to assume.
Oh, I don't know about that in numbers, because I've performed in very many states across Australia, and also I was in a corporate band that travelled quite far and wide across Asia and the Americas. And so I would say the highlight gig was probably Las Vegas, where we performed a few times at Planet Hollywood. Yeah.
Oh, that must have been exciting. How old were you at the time when you went to Vegas?
That was probably only about 15 years ago. So
okay.
We went, I think, before the GFC we played, and we played after the GFC.
Must have been a pretty big difference in terms of from pre-GFC to after GFC in terms of like crowd numbers and that sort of thing, maybe? Or
absolutely. And also, hotel rates and that sort of thing. Before the GFC, hotel rooms were $200 to $250 a night. After the GFC, they were $80 a night, trying to attract American tourists from all over the country. Yeah, it was quite an experience. And there I met very many people from across the world as well in Las Vegas, and had some fantastic experiences performing live. Las Vegas, Hawaii, Thailand, New Zealand, Malaysia. And so, interestingly, now I'm the co-chair of Parliamentary Friends of Malaysia, Parliamentary Friends of Indonesia. I've been there many times. It's helped me on the parliamentary delegations that I have been on. I've just recently come back from one to Taiwan, which the previous travel that I had done really helped me in that. And I think understanding foreign affairs, understanding trade with a retail background, it all helps to make you a little more rounded as a representative of your community.
Yeah. And going back to your time in Las Vegas, you didn't hit any of the, casinos and, did a little bit of gambling, a little bit of blackjack here and there, or
I think I put $1 on Red 7, which was my late mother's favorite number.
Did you get anything back, or?
No, I'm not a gambler, so
that's good. That's good.
I did enjoy the shows. However, I saw Gladys Knight performed. I'm a big fan of Gladys Knight. She was an incredible Black American singer that is just marvelous. She's still going. I think she was recently here on the Gold Coast again. But I've met very many artists across my career as well. I met Pink once, Dizzy Gillespie, who was a famous jazz trumpet player. I was mentored by Don Burrows, who was an amazing Australian living legend until he died during COVID. And just on that, I think with Don Burrows particularly, his life wasn't celebrated because he died during COVID. So there was no funeral, and I was in a remarkable position to be able to deliver a eulogy for him in the Federation Chamber in one of my very early speeches as an MP. And so it's funny how life works, where you get the opportunity if you stand up and take it, but you've got to be prepared to grab it and roll with it. And that's the advice that I give young people, no matter what it is, because you have to believe in yourself and you have to back yourself, because you can do it.
Always back yourself, always believe that you can do it, because at the end of the day, the only person that's probably going to stop you from doing something is yourself. So you might as well try it out and see, how far, how far you can go, because at the end of the day, if you fail, it's just another stepping stone to achieving your next goal. Failure is part of life, so always accept it wholeheartedly and, work on, understand why you maybe failed in this certain task or this certain idea, and, prepare better for next time and make sure that you don't make the same mistakes over and over again.
Well, nobody gets it right the first time, really.
Exactly.
So it is about practice, and it's about precision, practice, and patience, really. I think you've got to have the time and effort and energy to invest in yourself, because if you don't invest back in yourself, you can't invest in others. So it's important to look after yourself, to educate yourself, and to reinvest back into yourself, your family, your community, so that you can help others. That's why I love the Gold Coast.
Yeah, and I guess the Gold Coast is a little bit like Vegas too. They call it the Vegas of Australia in a sense. So
I think it's got a little more depth, to be honest. Here on the Gold Coast, we have thriving arts scene. Sure, there's some similes with the tourism and that sort of thing, that sector, but we also have here on the Gold Coast manufacturing, and we have a great service industry and a thriving tourism industry, and we have the beach.
And who doesn't love the beach?
Las Vegas doesn't have.
I mean, they've probably got a man-made beach.
Well, they've got the Grand Canyon is fairly close, and they've got the Nevada desert as well. So it's an interesting place to go. And I certainly benefited from being exposed to doing an international gig, if you like. It was a terrific opportunity and experience to do that. So I'm very grateful for those opportunities.
And so you were just there for about when you first went to Las Vegas, were you there for just a couple months there for the gig, and then you came back again after the GFC a couple years later for a couple months again? Or how long did you normally stay?
Three gigs, and I think it was about 4 days. So
okay, not even that long.
No, just in for the gigs and to do those, and then back out again. Yeah.
My next question to you, Angie, you did briefly talk about this a little bit. So you worked in sales in retail especially and the marketing industries for 17 years, all across Australia from Victoria, my home state, all the way to Queensland where you currently are, mainly as a sales rep, a sales agent, and a retail consultant. How did your career in sales and marketing help you in your own political career? And are there some facets of both industries that are interconnected and interlined?
That's a really good question. I think it comes down to life experience before politics, and I think it's really important that if you have people listening who want a political career, that you should have some life experience in other sectors, because there are skills there that you
politician.
need. Well, I think there are skills that you need in order to be effective at your job. And one is communication. Another one is being able to get on a level with people really quickly, and different types of people from different backgrounds. And that's what sales and marketing did for me. Being a sales representative, I was for a long time. I travelled a lot and I met a lot of different people, and I was selling the features and benefits of a product. And when you think about that in terms of politics, it's very similar in a lot of ways, because there is a lot of travel, you're meeting a lot of different people, and you are selling an idea, because politics is a contest of ideas. And so there are lots of similarities. Also, I think having come from a small business background, that resonated with my pre-selectors and with my electorate, or the electorate that I am privileged to represent, and that is Moncrieff, where here we have 32,000 registered businesses. And in most other electorates, yeah, it's quite a lot. Most other electorates around the country are about half that. But here on the Gold Coast, we have about 70,000 registered businesses across the three beachside electorates, or on the Gold Coast city limits. And so Moncrieff is pretty small business heavy. And so coming from a small business background, having written a book on small business, the small business model, the retail business model, and understanding business as intimately as I do, I think that was definitely something that the LNP looked at favourably, because it really is about representing your local community. And I have a good insight into small and family business, particularly because I worked there since I was 13 or 14.
Yeah, and small businesses are an integral part of our economy, especially some people don't necessarily realize that small businesses employ upwards of probably half or even more of Australians. So it's really, really important that we provide them with the necessary support and necessary resources for them to succeed.
That's right. And we saw during COVID the Liberal National Party support small business and support employees and employers through the JobKeeper program. And in Moncrieff, that was extended to 10,500 businesses. And so if we didn't have JobKeeper during the COVID pandemic, the Gold Coast would look very different to the way it does now. So I'm very proud of that.
It looked like a barren wasteland.
Lots of empty shops with no businesses in them.
Yeah. And I mean, sadly, there are a lot of regional communities across our nation that probably are suffering a lot from that sort of, COVID era where, a lot of businesses had to shut, and logistically, it's not really as if a regional community is locked down, those sort of, online services don't really exist in regional communities. So it's sad to see a lot of those small businesses being shut down because of COVID, because of, being locked down and that sort of thing in 2020.
Well, I know there would have been a lot more had we not extended JobKeeper across the nation. So I'm very proud of that.
That is very, very true, though. Very, very true. If it wasn't for JobKeeper, there'd be heaps of businesses all across our nation that wouldn't be succeeding and doing as well as they are now without JobKeeper.
Yeah.
Without JobKeeper.
And I spent a lot of time during that period as my first term on the backbench, and I spent a lot of time lobbying the government ministers of the day to deliver more for businesses. The Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, at that time was always available to talk to about business and what they needed to help them. I had roundtables here for tourism operators on the Gold Coast. had Simon Birmingham, who was the Trade and Tourism Minister at the time, at a round table as well. And we informed the government of the day exactly what was going on the ground. And I think the Gold Coast was a bit of a litmus test because it happened here first in a lot of instances, because we're so heavy on small and family businesses in particular. And so there was a lot of work in advocating for the Gold Coast at that time. And so I'm very proud of the work I did.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure a lot of the constituents of Moncrieff are very proud of the work you did, because you got re-elected in 2022. So
yeah, well, I hope so.
Hope so. We'll see. Well, hopefully they're happy with your service again in 2025. But you always got to keep working hard to make sure you're representing your constituents at the best level possible.
Absolutely, of course.
Yeah. We'll move on to our next question then for you, Angie. So you did touch on this again in one of your previous answers, but you spent a couple months before you ran for Parliament, actually, you spent a couple months working as the Chief of Staff for the member of Currumbin, Jane Stuckley. How did the political office environment prepare you for your own political campaign? And did you learn a lot of useful techniques to connect with constituents?
The answer is yes. It was a good experience to be able to run the office of a Member of Parliament. She was a state Member of Parliament, a former minister in the LNP under Campbell Newman. And I did learn a lot when I ran her office. State offices in opposition in particular are much smaller than federal offices, but there was certainly a lot that I learned accompanying her into the community as well, with her speeches and doing her media and running her office. There were a lot of skills there that I probably use daily now in my office, although I have a fantastic team around me who support and know their job very well, and so I don't need to worry about the job that they're doing, because I hear it back from the community, the sort of job they're doing, because the community is talking to my office all the time, and I get feedback all the time from the community. People come up to me and thank me for the great job that my staff are doing here from the office, because we always put constituents first. Customer service, because of my retail background, I guess, is really important to me, and they all know that we help people as much as we possibly can, and it's a great privilege to do so. And so it was a good time. I learned a lot, and I only was there for 8 weeks because the opportunity to run for Moncrieff then came up during that period, and so I had to step down. The rules are that you cannot receive any remuneration from any Commonwealth entity while you're running for office, and so I stepped down from that role and from the women's presidency in order to work for the member for Currumbin.
Yeah, and there were many, and as you were saying before, there's a lot of similarities, I guess, with the retail industry, and working as a chief of staff in a political office, you have to connect with the communities. You're selling a product, sometimes you're selling an idea, as you said before. So there are a lot of similarities, I guess, in the political sphere and in the retail sphere.
Definitely. It's all about people, isn't it? Politics is all about people and supporting and helping people. And my time as the office manager for Jan, there's no chief of staff unless you're a minister. At that time, she was in opposition as a state member, and I don't believe she had a portfolio at that time. So I was running her office, and I learned a lot. It was a good experience.
Yep, and I'm going to assume it wasn't there wasn't many staff in the office as well. So probably 3 or 4 members of staff there. So
there are 2 for the state members in opposition.
So
2. So there was myself and another staff member.
And you were all full time at that point as well. Yes,
that's right.
Yeah, so it's quite similar, I guess, to Victoria as well. As I'm working for a state member technically right now, and honestly, we are a bit overstaffed. But there's a lot of casuals and part timers, so that's why it kind of all does add up to just being 2 per day. So yeah. We'll move on to our next question for you, Angie. So this is a very big question. You were talking about this before. So who would you say is your political role model or idol? And I'm probably going to guess who you're going to say here, actually. Does his name start with J?
Well, Joe and I remain very good friends, and all through his ambassadorship in the United States as well, we stayed in contact. went to a State Department trip to the United States, to Washington, D.C., and he helped with a few events that I went to. We see each other regularly. Sometimes I'll come back from question time and he'll be sitting on the couch in my office, which is always a pleasant surprise when he comes to visit me in Canberra. But I think certainly he was one of my mentors. I've been really lucky to have many mentors in my life, not just my political life, but we're talking about politics. Some of the mentors that I've had are the former member for Fadden, Stuart Robert, who was, if you like, a sponsor in a way. He stood up for me, he had my back, he supported me, and he mentored me to come into the party. And then the whole time that I've been in politics, he was a great support to me and a friend. Greg Hunt was also another one of my valued mentors. Josh Frydenberg was a close friend of mine. I was devastated.
Basically, the whole senior Liberal Party room at
he
that
lost.
point.
Well, absolutely. And I think that it's important to have mentors, and I have different mentors today because those individuals are no longer in the parliament. And I think it's really important that you have a mentor, and that is someone that you trust, someone that you can ask tricky questions, because politics is a difficult game, and it's difficult to know who you can trust and with what information. And so, which is a shame, but that is the nature of the beast, right? So it's important to have people that you know you can go to. Maurice Payne was a very big confidant of mine, a good friend, and a fantastic mentor for women. She was the Minister for Women for some time. And so I think it's really important that we have those friends in politics. Simon Birmingham is another one that I would say I can speak to about very many different issues. But there are many of my colleagues that I feel I can go to if I need to float an idea or talk about anything really. And it's important, not just as a young person, but I think throughout your whole professional life, that you have mentors. I mean, even the Prime Minister, I know that Scott Morrison would speak with John Howard regularly, and I know that Peter Dutton speaks regularly with John Howard, and I think that there would be a mentor-mentee relationship there. So I don't believe it ever ends.
Exactly.
And just take as many mentors as you can get, right? People that give you honest advice, really, that just have your well-being and your success in mind. And it's not everyone, but I think you know who they are when you come across them. And
Exactly.
if you just say to them, would you mind being my mentor from time to time? Can I, speak to you about the issues that are on my mind? And if they're the right people, they'll say yes.
Exactly. Mentors can be anyone, basically. It could be, your lecturer in university, could be your office manager, could be anyone, your uncle, your aunt, the random guy you meet on the corner shop of the street, basically
I'm not
anyone.
so sure about the random guy, but certainly it's good to have positive role models in your life.
For sure.
And
it's always good to, have someone, not necessarily even a mentor, have someone to talk to about, your issues and what's going on with yourself. That's really, really important.
Someone who cares. That's really important.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you don't want to be talking to someone you think is your mentor, and then they're just in the back of their mind, they're like, why are you even speaking to me? I don't want to listen to all of that. Like, you don't want to have someone like that. You want to have someone that you can rely on and you can trust to tell all this information.
And I think having a peer mentor is a good thing too, Francis, where you might, buddy up with someone that they've got something to offer you and you've got something to offer them. That's a win-win situation. And so I think that's a valuable relationship to have too.
Yeah, because as peer mentors, you're both at the same position in terms of like where you are in life and where you may be in your career or something like that. So it's good to have someone at the same stage as you who's probably going on along the same path where you can ask them how they handled a certain situation or what they did in this situation, because they're doing the same role and they're hopefully going into the same industry maybe as you. So it's always important to have some people around you who are following on with where you're going, so you're not alone at that point.
And further to that, you then become a mentor. And so I'm in the privileged position where I've been able to mentor a number of women in particular through the Pathway to Politics program at QUT and other programs, party programs, where I'm able to then pay it forward and mentor young women in particular, because I'd like to see more women in all parliaments across Australia, including the federal parliament, and it's a great privilege to be able to mentor as many as possible. Some of them are already in office, and I hope there's many more to come that I'm helping at the moment.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So our next question to you, Angie, is what made you run in the 2019 federal election for the Liberal National Party? And what made you join the Liberal National Party? And you did touch on this question briefly, but if you could give a little bit more of a detailed answer, that would be great.
I'm not sure if you can hear that ambulance going past.
Is that from
a bit of noise?
Is that someone
outside.
falling off a roller coaster at Movie World or something? Or I'm not. That's not. I mean, probably
there
not.
You go. Quiet now. Great. Well, I think what I mentioned before was preserving that equality of opportunity is so important to me, because I came from social housing, from a underprivileged background, and I was able to work my way up, educate myself, to become a member of parliament. And I think that is one of the great strengths of our democracy, that we can still do that. In many countries, being a politician is reserved for the wealthy elite.
Yeah.
And for me, it's so important. And that's why I'm delivering the Gold Coast Youth Impact Summit again on the Gold Coast this year at the end of May, to preserve those opportunities and deliver them for young people. It's up to the young person whether they take the opportunity. And if they don't, that's their choice. But if the opportunity is not there to start with, how can they run with that opportunity? They can't. And so it's really important to me, as it's a very personal thing for me, because that was my life story, of that opportunity to be a Rotary Scholar, and all of the opportunities that came after that, because I learned to say yes, and because I learned to be out of my comfort zone and to believe in myself and back myself in a way that serves the community, not in an arrogant way or a bombastic way, but in a way that is servile leadership. And that's what I believe in, where you are serving your community. You're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your party and for the people that you represent. And that's so important to me in terms of my level of success. And I don't take it for granted. Every day that I'm in office is absolutely a privilege. And if it's all over tomorrow for whatever reason, sometimes political careers end badly, then I'm grateful for what I've been able to achieve. But I hope there's much more to come, because I want to help so many more people.
Yeah. And, for sure, those sort of, opportunities don't arise very often, as you were saying. So it's always important to take those opportunities. And, with that youth summit coming up, I'm assuming you would want a lot of, young people, especially in Queensland, to come along and, attend that sort of thing, because it's a great opportunity for them to get involved in politics and to see, how politics is, and, get involved, because it's so important for young people. I know especially there's a lot of young people, even my age, that I'm associated with, that I talk to, that who just aren't really involved as much in politics. And, it's fine for, it's their choice. I'm not forcing them to be involved, but, politics is our everyday life. The decisions you make, Angie, the decisions that, Anthony Albanese makes, the decisions that members of parliament make every single day reflect our lives, and how we live our lives, and, whether we can have food on the table, whether you can have a stable job, whether you can go, whether you can get the support that you need in terms of, health services. So it's really, really important that young people are educated and understand that, politics is part of our everyday lives, and it's important to at least have a decent knowledge of it, just so, you can see what's really going on and understand whether, and develop your own opinions. And at the end of the day, when you go to the ballot box and you vote for a politician, you understand who you're voting for, really.
I couldn't agree more. And that's the beauty of our democracy and our three levels of government. It's important that young people understand local government, state government and federal government, and the differences and the responsibilities of each level of government as well. I was speaking at a public high school this morning, even to the school leaders. I really enjoy speaking to school leaders, and just locally here at Miami High, just near where I live, speaking to young people about the importance of understanding government, but also, as you say, making your vote count by being informed. And I think that's really important.
Really
I just
is.
say the Youth Summit here on the Gold Coast is more about delivering opportunities than it is about politics. It is about bringing together young people from across the Gold Coast from different backgrounds and different schools, public schools, private schools, community organisations, to inspire them like I was inspired, but also to educate them on what is available to them in terms of opportunities. And I think that is the key. Opportunities and education, they're the two keys to a successful and bright future.
For sure, for sure. And, you know, from your experience, Angie, you get, you know, coming from, you know, social housing and that sort of thing, it is really important that, you know, education is, I think, an integral part of, you know, uplifting yourself and moving yourself in the right pathway. You know, I can speak from experience seeing my family in the Philippines struggle. You know, a lot of them aren't very rich, a lot of them live in poverty and that sort of thing. So, and from what I've seen and from how you get out of that sort of situation, it's really via education and providing those sort of opportunities to people to better their lives and, you know, to get a university education and to gain a career.
Absolutely. You've summed it up beautifully.
Yeah. We'll move on to our final question for you, Ange. Just seeing as, you know, I've had you for over an hour, so you must be having a lot of busy, frantic calls from your office right now saying, "Where's Angie? Where's Angie? But I need to speak to her." So we'll move on to our final question. So, finally, what's one piece of advice you'd give to students in 2024, especially those who are starting university or high school?
Well, I would refer back to what I said about life not being a straight line. Life is a zigzag, and it's about enjoying the ride, enjoying the pathway, the opportunities, taking those opportunities and building on them and building something for yourself. The advice that I gave the group of leaders this morning was to save a little bit of money, even if it's every week, even if it's only $5 a week, $10 a week. Save that money and build something for yourself so that you have choices. Because if you don't have any money and you find yourself in a difficult position, then you don't have any choice. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so if you can build yourself a little nest egg so that you have a choice when you need to make a choice, that will make a difference to your life. And so I think that's probably the advice that I would give young people. Just save a little nest egg for yourself so that you can look after yourself, and then you can invest later on down the track as you decide what you want to do with your savings. But isn't it better to have that choice in front of you? What am I going to do with my savings, rather than I don't have any savings?
Yeah.
And that's where people come into difficulty, when there's no choice in what you can do. So squirrel that money away, even if it's only a little bit.
Even if it's only 20
it
cents.
all adds up. Yeah, well, it all adds up in the long
Exactly.
run, you know. And so young people can put money into a term deposit and then get interest paid on it. It's pretend you don't have it, but so you can save it every week so that you have a little nest egg for yourself, and then you can have some choice in your life about what you do and where you want to go. Secondly, I'd say education is the key. And I finished high school, then I went to university for a couple of years and studied saxophone and voice. Then I had a long break from education, and then I didn't come back to study until I was about 45, and I went to TAFE and I did a Certificate 4 in workplace training and assessment, and I became a retail consultant and trainer. And then I went back to Griffith University age 45 as a mature age student and studied business and marketing. So I think a lifelong dedication to learning is really important for your future. It doesn't finish after high school. It doesn't finish after university. And one little joke that I like to say is that even the Prime Minister is still learning.
Exactly.
But it's certainly true that if you dedicate your life to learning, then you can be the best that you can be for your community. And that's really important when so many people are trusting you to represent them, that you are the best that you can be at any point in time. And that's not always easy. I'm not saying I'm the best of the best all the time. It's a work in progress.
Sometimes.
Well, it's a work in progress, right? So you've got to keep telling yourself and keep pulling yourself up, depending on what your background is and what you've learned and what you've had to unlearn as well as part of it. But I think being vigilant about your own behaviours and the way you talk, the way you walk, certainly when you're in politics, you're under the microscope. And leaders are, and this is what I say to school students, you're a leader of the school. It's a big responsibility. People will look up to you as a role model, and that is a big responsibility. It's a big deal.
You may not think it is, but it actually is a big deal.
It is. It is a very big deal in your community. And when other students from across the school come up to a student leader and ask for help, the student leader needs to step up and help that student get around whatever problem it is that they're concerned with. And it's no different in politics. When someone comes into my office and they need help, we step up and help them as much as we can. We like to send them away better than they arrived. And sometimes they just want to be heard. Sometimes you just have to listen. So listening, learning, and leading by example are the 3 L's of leadership that I talk about for young people. And I think that's very important. So that would be my advice.
A great deal of advice there. A great deal of advice there, Angie. At the start, I thought you were going to be a financial advisor, and then a little bit more about leadership and stuff. So we do really appreciate that sort of advice. And I think in general for a lot of young people, especially around saving in this sort of economic climate that we're in, it's very, very important that we see the long-term gain for short-term pain. So if you do save a little bit of money here and there, eventually it will add up, and it may help us in the future, whether that be buying your first car, buying your first house, that sort of thing, which for a lot of young people now seems very distant.
I understand it's very difficult, the cost of living, and deposits for houses, and house prices versus wages have gone from 4 times to 8 times across the country. So for your generation, it is much harder than it's been for generations before. And really the only advice I can offer there is to just even if it's $5 a week or $10 a week, over time it adds up. And if you find yourself with 0 in your bank account when you need to make a decision, you won't have a choice, and that's when things get really tough.
Yeah, for sure. Because, when there's no savings in the bank account, you've got nothing to really spend. And when you're on when you're, unemployed and, struggling to make ends meet, that sort of savings that you might have saved when you were young can be crucial to uplift yourself and, find your next job and that sort of thing. Because, as you said, life is a zigzag. You don't know where you're going to end up. So always being prepared for future circumstances, whether they be good or bad, is really, really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed our time, Francis.
Yeah. I've enjoyed it too, Angie. It's been a very, very interesting and very informative episode. Maybe even better than the Matt Canavan episode, I have to admit.
Thank you. I'll take that.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. So is there anything else that you want to say, or we can end it off there?
I would just say to young people that are watching that I have you back as the Shadow Minister for Youth. I'm working on trying to assist you as much as I can, certainly here on the Gold Coast. Some people say in opposition that you can't deliver anything, but here on the Gold Coast, we're delivering the Youth Summit to Gold Coasters only. You have to be a resident in order to come to the Youth Summit.
Oh, such a shame.
I'd love to see them all over the country, but I have you back. And for those of you that are working hard and trying hard, keep up the good work. And just keep going. So important.
Just keep going, never give up. Never, ever give up. That's the
right.
last thing you should do. So yeah, those are all our questions for you, Angie. As I said before, do really appreciate you coming on the podcast for the last 75 minutes or so. So I know it's been a pretty long interview, but it's felt very short, which is a good thing. So we do really appreciate you coming onto the podcast and speaking to myself and Tobias and George, who helped me make the questions just around, your personal life, your life before politics, and, your really keen and avid stewardship around young people, especially entering politics.
Thank you so much for your time.